All right, welcome one, welcome all to the Blogging the Boys Roundtable. We are back this week. There's a lot to catch up on because I don't know about y'all, this has been the longest week. It hasn't even felt like a week with everything that has happened in all things Dallas Cowboys free agency. I'm your host for the night, Jess Nevarez. We have David Howman right here to my left, and then we have Loree right here, kind of across from me, and then we have the one, the only Danny Phantom right here under me. It's just four of us, so we're in a nice little Brady Bunch-esque little box tonight, and we have a lot to talk about. So first and foremost, when Brandon and I talk on our podcast, we always call it our therapy. And usually that's because we need to vent about all things Dallas Cowboys. But I feel like this week we have a good vent session that's going to come on. So, Howman, I'm going to start with you. How are you feeling about what the Cowboys have done so far during this free agency?
I'm feeling really great. I feel like everything that they have done so far with their trades, with the contract decisions that they've done, it's basically all I could have asked for, and I never thought that they would actually follow through on. So it's always fun when your favorite team does the things that you think are a smart move, and hopefully it turns out to actually be a good move in the end, and the Cowboys are able to get over the hump and get a little further in the playoffs. But for right now, being in the offseason, it feels good.
All right. And then, Brandon, we talked a little bit about this on the writer's block, but overall, because there was still a lot that happened even after we recorded, how do you feel about free agency as a whole so far? If you had to give it on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you ranking it?
Well, I would say a 10, and I'm kind of freaking out because, as you can see, I'm not in my usual spot. I kind of had to go into my bunker because I think it's just like the world is ending. How is this possible that the Cowboys are acting like this right now? It's truly something. Yeah, I have to say, I mean, it really is something to behold because we talked about this on our podcast last night that this free agency period kind of set up really well for the Cowboys where the market has not gone out of control. I mean, you even see someone like Dalton Schultz get 1 year and then the contract terms end up being like $6.25 million. And then, with incentives and stuff, it adds up to the 9. But there really isn't a strong market for a lot of these free agents. So the Cowboys were actually saying, like, there's not going to be a market. Like, of course, we're not going to be the ones to reset it. So we have a lot more guys that we can get at market value that are still quality players. So I've been very impressed. I know we talked about it last night that I'd give it a 5-star rating. I'll give it a 10 here right now. I really can't find any sort of negatives with what they've done so far, which is a very rare thing to say.
And Danny, I have been dying to hear your opinion on this free agency because usually you're a realist. When it comes to all things Cowboys, you're going to be real with it to the point. How are you feeling about free agency?
That's nice words, Jess. I've almost
I
have a
mean it
little
from the
tear
bottom
there.
of my heart. I really do.
I mean, I feel fantastic. How much do you have to shake things up to have Loree be a doomsdayer? So I mean, look at the thing that makes me happy is I feel like it's got a little bit of everything, for everyone. And it's like, a lot of us are on different ends with like what we want the Cowboys to do, and with the moves they've made, they kind of like brought us all together because we're all happy. It's really hard to be upset about anything they've done. And to me, one of the moves that no one's really talking about that I'm happy about because I am a cap guy, Stephen Jones, burner account guy, and I love the cap. But
we
like
know. We know that.
I know. But what they did with Tyron Smith is just, I mean, that's just one of the most brilliant contracts I've seen them do because it's like we were debating like, if we had this, it'd be great to have that, but we have to pick one or the other. But no, the Jones managed to do both. Super happy, and also I don't even know what kind of contract sorcery they did with Brandon Cooks because some money's missing, and we like turned him in to like half price. Really, to be quite honest, he was like a 2-year $40 million guy. He's a 2-year $20 million guy now, so that's fantastic, in a great mood. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I could be much happier.
I was going to add one more thing to that, and when you look at the moves that they made just today before we're recording this podcast, that's like a whole offseason for the Cowboys, when it comes to free agency. And you look at the players that they got, backup offensive line as like a swing tackle, a rotational pass rusher that has high upside and familiarity with Dan Quinn. And that's really what you expect from the Cowboys, backup running backs, all these things. And we forget that they had an entire week last week where they addressed so many needs, brought in a lot of guys. And this is just like icing on the cake at this point. And you would think that at this point, what we saw today is all that would happen for the Cowboys. But the fact that they already addressed so much beforehand at like what Danny is saying, like very fiscally responsible, it's like right in their wheelhouse. And I think that we've seen a big difference in the front office, how they do things, especially with releasing Ezekiel Elliott. For all the fans out there that, it stinks. But when it comes to the Cowboys, it's unheard of for them to do that. So the fact that they did that, it's like you're turning over a brand new leaf. And this is a front office that I quite frankly don't really recognize right now.
And I like how you said icing on the cake, but we're talking about the Cowboys. So I think it would be more like ice cream on the pie sort
Yeah.
of situation, just to keep things very appropriate. And I know Danny loves to talk about pie. I know everybody here loves when I bring up pie. So had to throw that in there. But let's go down the list of the additions, the departures, and the returns overall that we've seen just within this last week overall, because there has been a lot of action. Additions, obviously, you have Stephon Gilmore, Brandon Cooks, Chuma Edoga, which I learned how to say today, by the way, Ronald Jones. Those are your additions. And then Chuma and Ronald actually coming in today, as Brandon and Danny were alluding to there. Your departures, you have Connor McGovern, Luke Gifford, Noah Brown, of course, Ezekiel Elliott, we know. And then one that didn't really come as a surprise, Dalton Schultz. It was surprising, however. He chose to go with the Texans. As for re-signings, you have Tony Pollard on that franchise tag, Terrence Steele, Donovan Wilson, woohoo, LVE, CJ Goodwin, Cooper Rush, Rico Dowdle, that happened today, as well as Dante Fowler, which I think was a fantastic move. But Howman, we'll go back to you. Overall, how do you feel with the departures we've seen so far? Is there anybody on that list that you really were rooting for the Cowboys to re-sign?
Not really, to be honest. I think all of those guys are guys that if they had brought them back, especially on, cheap team-friendly deals, it wouldn't really be, it wouldn't be something that you'd be upset about. I think, especially like with Dalton Schultz, he was probably the most high profile of those guys. If the Cowboys were to have brought him back at what the Texans just paid him, I would not be upset. I think a lot of the reason the Cowboys decided to move on from him was just that he was asking for a much bigger deal than they were comfortable paying. And it turns out the rest of the NFL was also equally uncomfortable. So if they had gone that route, I wouldn't have been upset with it if they brought back Noah Brown, provided that they still prioritize upgrading their wide receiver core, which they've already done with Cooks. I would not have been upset. But at the same time, I think it was refreshing that this front office didn't just say, we're going to bring these guys back because, as you know, they like their guys. I think it's just one other instance of how they're taking a different approach this offseason.
Very good point there. And Brandon, this question is going to be for you. He said he's not a fan of the Rojo signing. He feels that there's 3 running backs that are good runners and pass catchers, but none of them are built as third down or short yard backs. So how do you feel about the Rojo signing overall? And do you feel like he's going to be part of that 1-2 punch? Or again, there's other options you can go with here. You have Rico Dowdle now in the mix. You have the Malik Davis still in the mix, or you draft a running back. Which route do you really see the Cowboys going as far as that running back position goes with Tony Pollard?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I do think that Ronald Jones, of course, is not going to prevent the Cowboys from drafting a running back, in May, and he might not even make it out of training camp. And I'm not saying this anything against him or the player, the type of guy that he is. It's just the facts of, I mean, we'll see what the money is to the commitment, but I don't think it's going to be anything crazy. But I do think that him coming in, it feels that veteran experience, like Ryan mentioned, and it's just some guy to have on the roster as a protection just in case. I mean, listen, they brought back Rico Dowdle, and he hasn't been able to stay healthy out going into the season or very little into the season. So you don't know what's going to happen with Tony Pollard in his recovery. You might even just see that Ronald Jones is a guy that they use in mini camp and training camp just to get reps, so that not a lot of pressure is on Tony Pollard and whoever they draft. Listen, there's a lot of guys right now, but the Cowboys have a way of figuring all this stuff out. You might see that the guys that they signed today might not even make the roster. And these are like the moves that we said before that they usually make. But now it's just, again, they already made the major moves. This is just a little extra stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's a quality signing. I don't have any qualms with it because I don't think the money's too crazy. If they offered, $10 million, they might be like, what are you doing? But I don't think that's the case. So I'm really not too upset with that.
And staying on the running back position, Danny, I see Brian talking about wanting to bring maybe Zeke back for about $2.5 million after he feels nobody signs him at that point before the season starts. Do you think there is a possibility that Zeke could come back to the Cowboys at any point during this time?
I do not. I mean, to me, when we had this discussion before too, it's like it's not. To me, it was never about what would be the right price to bring him back. It's to me, I just don't think he's actually providing valuable reps now. I know he adds something in pass protection, he adds something in short yardage. He's tough and he's competitive. He's got a lot of things, but I don't want a roster spot allocated to that because I do think the Cowboys, they're going to pick their best three. And like Brandon said, I don't think either of the guys they signed today are going to be a part of that. I think it's going to be Pollard, Malik, and then the rookie that they're going to draft, and there's going to be your running back. So there's just not room for it, and I don't want to save a spot for a player, and I don't want to be tempted to have him and use him because I really thought that one of the Cowboys' mistakes sometimes last year was just overcommitment to using him, and it just wasn't working. So no, I don't think so. I love Zeke, but I mean, I just don't really want to see that happen.
Howman, you had your hand raised very politely. I love that. So are you counteracting with Danny here? Do you see that there could be a multiverse where we get all of these incredible offseason signings and additions, and then you see Zeke maybe return at the end of it? Do you see that being a possibility or no?
Well, I mean, I think it's always a possibility just because the front office really likes Zeke, and if there's a situation where they can bring him back, I think they might explore that. But I was just going to add on to Danny's point. Actually, usually we're at odds, but I just wanted to follow up. And with the idea of bringing Zeke back for pass protection, I think that's going to be kind of a not as important role for running backs going forward with Mike McCarthy calling the plays. He comes from the West Coast offense, and a lot of that is based on basically for the quarterback. You're either going to you either have your first read that's generally, something across the field, something down the field, or you're dumping it off to your check down, whether it's a tight end or a running back. So I think that, we're not really going to see as much of a priority on running backs that can pass protect because instead they're going to be going out to run a route for that check down so that they're not relying on the pass protection, rather just getting the ball out of Dak's hand.
Very good point there, Brian, saying that Zeke didn't provide valuable reps because Kellen didn't use him in a valuable way. They played him way too much, and he needs to be strictly third down, short yardage blocking, and red zone usage only, which is what we saw last season. We saw most of Zeke's touchdowns, 12 touchdowns in one season, by the way. I would say that's pretty valuable. They were in the red zone, really. So, again, they were using him in the ways that I think was mentioned, but I also think he wasn't being used in the right ways as well. Brandon, are we going to duke it out? We're going to argue? What's your take on all this?
I will go against what the guys are saying. I do think that there's a possibility that Zeke comes back, but I'll put it with the caveat that it might be for a one-day contract. Maybe he decides to retire. And I don't know if that's a possibility. I'm not speaking on anything that I know about, but when you look at the way that the running back market is right now, where teams, like when you see realistic options for him to go to, Buffalo signed a guy, Miami has a few guys in place, the Texans even, just signed Devin Singletary, and maybe the one landing spot, you look at Tampa Bay, possibly Skip Pete's there, his old running back coach, but, are they going to be willing to commit to somebody like Zeke if they're going to be in a rebuilding mode? So I don't know if there's a lot of options out there for him right now where he might just look at it and say, listen, I made my money. I'm healthy. I have, my health and everything to kind of move forward with my life. And, maybe this is it for me. So again, I don't know anything, but that's the only thing I might see with him coming back this season specifically would be on like a one-day contract.
Definitely would be weird to see Zeke in anything but a Cowboys jersey. I will tell you all that much. That'd be a rough day. Brandon and I were talking about it last night and just naming some of the players we've seen, DeMarco Murray, in, opposing jerseys. And that's horrible. So, yeah, no thanks. We're going to skip over that. But what we're not going to skip over is our game for the day, because as we all know, we are in the middle of March Madness. So I was thinking, how do we make this a BTV style March Madness game to appease everybody? Because, hey, who doesn't love to keep up with March Madness during this time of the year? But here's what we're going to do. I have a little bracket set up that has an offensive side and then a defensive / specialist side that we're going to go through category by category. And yes, the guys have cheated, so they know what the bracket looks like, that you're not getting them on the spot. You're getting well thought out answers here to what exactly their position of choice is going to be on that specific bracket. So we're going to start on the offensive side of this bracket. And how this is going to work is I'm going to ask, do you want this position or this position? I'm going to go around. We'll start with Howman. We'll go with Brandon. We'll go with Danny after that. And then we'll say yes or no. And then whoever wins that part of the bracket will move on to the next part until we find, here's the kicker, who you think the Dallas Cowboys are going to draft for their first round draft pick. So all of this is going to dwindle down to who is the most realistic position, or what realistic position you see the Dallas Cowboys getting in that first round after this very productive free agent week, which, really changed a lot of those draft brackets. Guys, I know we're all very heavily into the draft, but Danny, how much has this week alone impacted your potential mock draft that you have going on?
I'm glad you started with me because I'm the right person to make the statement. Is it impacted at 0 because the Cowboys,
wow,
they always approach free agency to fill holes because their intent is to draft as pure as possible. So they don't want to go in there and having to draft needs and valuing this position over that position. So to me, I feel like the Cowboys have a good idea about the landscape of the draft. And I think because of that, and they would know which positions are lean and which are rich, they have a good sense about how they're going to approach it. And I think that may in turn influenced how they go about their free agency. And you might see this guy come in versus this guy. So to me, it changes nothing. I haven't put together a board yet. I'm trying to kind of to wait things out a little bit. I also want to I want to do it blind and have it just be my own. So I'm trying to stay away from the other influences. So to me, I don't have anything player stacked yet, but I will say this. I don't think that it has changed a whole lot as far as the Cowboys' plans.
Okay, Howman, what about you? Your personal mock draft, has this week really changed who you thought the Cowboys would go after for number 26 in the first round?
I gotta agree with Danny to some extent in that I think that it
You
really
agreed with Danny twice tonight. Are you okay? Let's start there. Are you okay? Are you feeling well? Are you good?
I'm gonna have to retire to my own bunker because things are just going crazy right now.
I guess. I don't know what is going on. Oh my goodness.
But I mean, I think the Cowboys, they've done similar, had similar strategies in the past. Granted, they haven't been as bold as bringing in guys like Stephon Gilmore or Brandon Cooks, but they generally try to get at least someone in there that can theoretically fill a hole on their roster. And with the two that they signed today from the outside coming in are kind of fit that bill more traditionally to what we've seen. And so I don't really think that they can still go out and draft a corner if that's going to be the best position there, because with Stephon Gilmore, obviously he's set up to be the starter this year, but he's on a 1-year deal. He's essentially a rental. Similarly with receiver, Brandon Cooks has 1 year after this, and it's also kind of set up to where if they really wanted to move on from him after this year, they could. So they still have a lot of freedom to go pretty much any direction that they want. The only thing I think is probably out of the picture is quarterback, but at least in the first round, that is. Maybe they'll look for a backup later on in the draft.
And Brandon, we know that the Cowboys are very draft and develop when it comes to their mindset. Do you feel like they're going to emphasize heavily on that draft and develop mindset, going into this draft? Or do you feel like more so now you have a lot of that veteran leadership that continues to really come into the Cowboys locker room? Do you feel like you're going to see a little bit more of that approach? Maybe not just even now, but as the season goes on, kind of like we saw last season with the late season additions.
Yeah, I think it's something that I was just thinking about, how I think the Cowboys are changing how they approach the draft. Like, they're still draft and develop, but I don't think that they're going to put as much pressure on their rookies to come in and be impact players like absolutely right away from the back end of the draft. When you look at Kelvin Joseph and how he's developed or lack thereove, maybe someone like in Deshaun Wright, Like those two players put them in a hole last season where when it came to the cornerback position, they weren't really prepared to kind of take that next step and develop. They had to bring guys in off the street. So you might see a scenario where like they're going to start protecting themselves with these veteran players like a Stephon Gilmore or Brandon Cooks, where you don't have a Jalen Tolbert instance happen like last season. And the Cowboys have been very good with having the rookies step in right away. But I think you might be starting to see a trend where maybe they just want to draft best player available, regardless if he has experience, lack of experience. And even someone like a Tyler Smith, even though he was a raw prospect, they knew that his mental makeup would be able to handle that type of position. They even brought in somebody like a Jason Peters to kind of help ease that transition as well. And honestly, for me, like when it comes to the draft, the only thing that would surprise me, like Howman mentioned, would be them taking a quarterback in the first round. They could trade, with Jack and his magic beans for a beanstalk for a draft pick for their first round draft pick. I still would be like, all right, yeah, no, I get it. Like, I trust them. Like, they have my trust full-heartedly because of the Tyler Smith pick, because of the things that they've done in the past where I see what they see now. And it's like, okay, a lot of these moves make sense. Taco Charlton, like that's the one like kind of asterisk, but they're not like that type of team anymore. They've moved on and grown and developed just like a beanstalk.
I love that you tied it back to the beanstalk. That was glorious. Love that. That really caught me off guard, but great point, Brandon. Okay, let's go ahead and start with our little BTB style March Madness bracket here. And we're going to start on the offensive side here. And I'm glad you brought up drafting a quarterback in the first round, because your first choice, gentlemen, are we going quarterback versus tight end? Who do you want to move on to round 2 of our bracket? And again, we'll start at Hellman. We'll make our way around.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm going to go with tight end here. I would much rather invest a pick in a tight end. For obvious reasons, I think Dak Prescott is, he is good. He is your quarterback, and they don't really need to spend a draft pick that high on the position. But also, I think tight end, when, I look at this offense right now, and, Jake Ferguson was really promising. Peyton Hendershot was really promising. But at the same time, you're losing a lot of production in Dalton Schultz. And this draft class has a lot of tight ends, especially at the top of the draft class, that can come in and be really great pass catching threats, like Dalton Kincaid out of Utah, Luke Musgrave from Oregon State, Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame. I think there's just so many options that they could go with that. For me, that's probably where I would most want to go, especially when you compare it with quarterback.
Very good explanation. I was laughing in the middle of that because Ryan in our chat said Dak and the Beanstalk, and
So
that
good.
is just amazing. I love that so much. Danny and Brandon, are we agreeing there with Howman? Are you picking tight end no matter what? Is quarterback just completely out of the question?
Danny, you go first. I want to hear what you think.
Well, first off, I want to say this. If there ever was an owner who might trade his draft pick for magic beans, it would be Jerry Jones. So let's just kind of,
let's not count it out.
Yeah. I will say this though: if there is a bigger Dak hater on this panel than myself, I mean, I would be surprised. But I don't consider myself a Dak hater. But I do find fault in him more so than I think a lot of other people. But in no way, in no form would we be considering, taking a quarterback in the first round. And I mean, it's not a need for us now. It's not a need for us tomorrow. And it's probably not a need for us 3 or 4 years down the road. So no, not at all. And also too, I might want to mention, if quarterback was even in the question, we would be talking about, packaging some draft capital to move up to actually get a viable quarterback, because so it just, and all any way you look at it, it's just it's the worst idea. So it's going to be, I'm going to be putting my money on tight end for this round.
Yeah, I was gonna say I agree, and to play sort of devil's advocate to why quarterback would be the only thing on the table is, Mike McCarthy comes from Green Bay. Green Bay has done this before. I know wasn't usually heavily involved in the draft process, but if he wants to draft and develop a guy, maybe some guy slips because there's a last minute update with a knee injury or something that kind of pops up and pushes him down the board. I think that would also tell a lot about where the Cowboys not only see their future with Dak Prescott, but also with Mike McCarthy. If you want to bring a guy in the first round, that usually means your head coach is sticking around for the most part. I mean, we've seen instances where, in Arizona, you draft Josh Rosen and the coach is out within a year. But I think that would say, maybe they have more faith in Mike McCarthy than they do Dak Prescott. And that's not been the case. They have clearly a little bit more faith, I think, in Dak. If I had to kind of it would be like 70-30, more on Dak than Mike McCarthy. But I do think tight end is the logical option here. Again, the draft sets up perfectly to where the Cowboys address their needs in free agency, where the players that are not really rich in this draft, they brought in safety, linebacker, all these guys. And tight end, they didn't decide to put any money towards with Dalton Schultz and bringing him back because they know how deep this tight end class is. Howman has been like from day one on the Luke Musgrave train, all these tight ends. So he got me on board. I know. Yeah, he got Jess on board. So I'm right along with them. Punch my ticket like the Polar Express.
The Polar Express now. Wow, we're just making all the references today. Danny, you had mentioned that you are not a Dak hater. You don't classify yourself as that. But somebody in the chat I saw up here said you're a Dak realist. So is that what you identify yourself as far as your, I guess, disdain for Dak Prescott?
I think we all identify ourselves as realists. I mean, let's be real. I mean, we all think we're being as truthful as we can. But I do. I mean, I have negative things to say about him. I'm fighting off the haters too. But I want to throw a quick question at you, Jess, because this got me thinking a little bit with everything that's going on. With the Cook signing and we have Tyron back and the Cowboys keeping their defense stuff. Do you feel like after the front office has said you can only do so much when you're paying a quarterback that much? So do you feel like that they've maybe changed their mind to where like what? Are they doubting Dak a little bit where that's like, we really need to give more resources and for this team to be successful? Or is there any part of you that's like thinking that maybe that they're starting to have a little bit of doubt?
I think they are keeping their eye on him more. I think it's become the lens has grown a little bit since last season because although, look, we're all realists here. We know the interceptions were an issue, but they were not just his issue. Offensively, they were an issue. Scheme-wise, they were an issue. And miscommunication more than anything was leading to those, interceptions. But I think maybe the front office is putting a little bit of a lens on him to say, well, let's see what you can get done. We're giving you everything to make the success possible. We're getting Kellen Moore out of the picture to make an offensive scheme with Mike McCarthy, who has ample experience in the play calling. You have Schottenheimer that came in, who is going to be able to, I think, work very well with McCarthy and, the vision that they have for this newly found offensive scheme you're going to see. Overall, I think Dak has done what he can with what he has. But for me personally, I think when it came to Kellen Moore, he was the one that was really holding Dak back in what he could do. It just looked like overall Dak was very confused with the scheme. It looked like he was in his own head trying to play the hero a little bit more. Of course, you had T.Y. Hilton in the mix, but he wasn't played enough. I mean, you had the pieces, but I don't think it was utilized well. So I want to say that the front office is saying here, take all of this. We're giving it to you so you can be even more successful. But I don't think it's even a question of, it's not to that point yet where they're questioning if Dak is the guy. Jerry Jones talked to the combine and he said, hey, until we see the digression in Dak's play, he's our guy. And basically, you saw them use that logic when it came to Zeke this offseason. So turning the script on me a little bit, Danny. I like that. Challenging me a little bit there, putting me on the spot. But I love that. So, all right, for our first round, tight end wins. So the next one we're going to go to is we're saying wide receiver versus offensive tackle. Guys, who are you taking? This is real. We're the Cowboys front office. We have to make a decision and dwindle down to that number one pick. Are you going wide receiver? You going OT? What are you thinking, Howman?
I think probably I would go wide receiver. I think probably the Cowboys are in a good spot right now with offensive tackle. Tyler Smith just had a really great rookie year. Tyron Smith is coming back. And, obviously Terrence Steele is recovering, but at the same time, it sounds like they're pretty optimistic that even if he isn't quite ready to go at the beginning of the offseason program, that he'll be able to get there in time for the season and play the bulk of the season. So I mean, I think they're in a good spot at tackle, and they're in a pretty good spot at receiver after getting Cooks too. But again, Michael Gallup is coming off of another injury that he sustained during the season that he got a scope for, still recovering from the ACL as well. And then Cooks is coming in, but he's an older player. He's got 2 years on his contract, so I think they're in a spot where they can still go and draft one of these receivers, especially if one of those top guys ends up falling just a little bit. If you can get a guy like that at 26, kind of similar to when CeeDee Lamb fell. It's a passing league, especially, Mike McCarthy is a pass happy play caller too. So I think it makes sense to try and load up on receiver. And also you can never have too much depth at receiver. That's one of those positions where, you never want to find yourself looking for an Odell Beckham who's still a free agent, or looking for a T.Y. Hilton that hasn't played all year. You'd like to have that depth already on your roster.
Love that. Brandon, what about you?
I was going to say, I take your words and I reverse them against you to the logic of that offensive tackle would make the most sense. And I say that because the last part that you mentioned where, you have a T.Y. Hilton, guys you can bring in, to me at the end of the season, like if you have an injury, you don't have a T.Y. Hilton out there who's an experienced offensive tackle. I think it's harder to find those guys on the street because the position is very valuable. And I do think when it comes to this draft, the wide receivers, I think, if you don't have one in the first round, you can find a very serviceable one, if not plus starter in the second round, third round. But when it comes to offensive tackle, I think that drop off is a little bit more significant. So if you have a guy there in the first round that you really like, I know in a couple comments, Darnell Wright out of Tennessee, that's a name. I know he's up a little bit higher on draft boards now, but that's a name that I would certainly love to have, just because you might be able to play him at offensive guard first, and then kick him out to tackle afterwards. And then, listen, if the Cowboys truly feel that Tyler Smith is a guard, you have Tyron Smith, who hasn't really proven to be healthy over the past few years. Josh Ball, Matt Waletzko, who is again going to come back from a shoulder injury. Terrence Steele, like your tackle depth is with like a big circle of question mark, around it, and you don't know where it can go. It can kind of fall apart in an instant. It's great right now, but I do think if you add a rookie in there, it kind of protects you a little bit more. And I think with your wide receiver room, you just add a guy in later in the draft. That would make me feel just a little bit more comfortable.
Danny, you are our tiebreaker for this. Which position are you going with? No pressure or anything.
You know what? There is pressure because both of this is really tough. I actually thought this would become the championship bracket for the offense, to be honest. It would have been for me. So really tough.
I threw you a little bit of a wrench with this one. I said, we're getting difficult early on in this bracket.
Yeah, we are. I mean, this is, I feel like this is the, toughest, and it's hard still for me. And I mean, actually, and Howman and I don't agree a lot, but I agree with everything that he said. But then Lowry comes back and everything makes sense. So I'm back on the offensive tackle spot. So I'm so confused, but so here's what it is for me. I think when you look at, we got Cooks for 2 years, we got CD forever, and we got Gallup for a good 3-4 years or whatever, probably, I don't know. So we're sitting pretty good at wide receiver. Now, if you look over the offensive line, we got Tyron back. We know that this might be his last year. He may not even make it through. We don't really know where Tyler Smith is going to play, probably future left tackle. We did sign Chumbawonga today, so, I mean, we got some depth. So it's really tough. And to me, the tiebreaker is going to be like, which player's better? And that's how I'm going to decide this. I don't know. Now, if it's JSN, I'm going to run to the podium. So, I mean, that's going to be an easy one for me, but at the same time, I'm not, against taking another tackle. The Cowboys are good at it. Maybe they'll get one and they want to move them inside, and then we'll have a great line. So, oh my goodness, I didn't answer, did I?
No, we're seeing you work
I get
through.
knocked down, but I get up again. Like, I'll sing for you guys while Danny makes a decision, because no, we did not answer it yet.
You know what? I'm gonna say, I'm gonna actually go with wide receiver is gonna win this one, because, I mean, we saw what happened last year.
Right.
And we were so upset about it. The whole Jalen Tolbert thing just left a sour taste in our mouth. And we want all these weapons. We want a plethora of weapons. And I think so I'm gonna give the nod to wide receiver. Tough, really tough one though. No more tough ones, Jess.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But yeah, no, that was surprising. You were really misleading us there. I thought for once tonight you were actually gonna disagree with Howman, and so far that is not the case. I don't know, like if y'all have an alliance going because Brandon and I are co-hosts. Like I'm not sure what's going on, but it's definitely a little bit suspect over there. All right, we're moving on to our next couple of positions. We have a running back versus an offensive guard. Gentlemen, which position are you going with? Howman, we'll start with you again.
Well, I think this is kind of ironic because I just argued against taking a tackle, and now I'm going to argue for taking a guard. And, you know, a lot of it really just boils down to positional value. You know, I think I personally have been very hard on the idea of taking a running back in the first round. I think it's just an improper allocation of resources. We've seen time and time again, even for the Cowboys specifically with Tony Pollard, you can find really good productive running backs in the middle rounds of the draft. So I don't think that it really makes sense, especially with the Cowboys setting this up to take the best player available. I don't think it makes sense to then go ahead and spend that first pick on a position that you could find a really productive player later on in the draft. Similarly with guard, you know, like we just talked about, we don't know if Tyler Smith is going to be playing at left guard or if he's going to be moving out to tackle. So there's some uncertainty there. And then, you know, behind Tyler Biotish and Zach Martin, you don't really have a whole lot of depth that's returning. What you do have in Matt Farniok, he was, you know, hurt throughout the year. So I just think from a positional value perspective, it makes sense to get a guard and kind of help build up those trenches, even if they're not necessarily starting right away. You know, that's kind of a good thing because then you've got your best 5 players out there. But at the same time, I think there's some pretty solid guards in this draft that will be available kind of in their range with Steve Avila out of TCU, Osiris Torrance from Florida.
All right, Brandon, what about you? What position
Hey,
are you?
whoa. Brandon wants to go last.
Oh, Brandon. Okay. Oh,
no,
right.
I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
No, Danny, go ahead. You were very eager for this one.
I'm going to wait for a tougher one. I just realized this is not the time to be saying that. So,
oh my goodness, Danny has a little bit of fire in him today,
listen,
guys.
I don't think we should put him in the position to be the tiebreaker again. And it's not going to be this time around.
Oh no, he has some fire in him. So like, if anybody's being the tiebreaker tonight, it's always going to be Danny. I'm just saying.
Hey, I'll take it.
But himself,
you know, like Danny answered with the last question, and this is sort of like the chicken answer for me, where it's like, well, it depends on who's there. You know, like if it is Bijan, is it you know him there, or is it somebody else? Like for me, I'd take Jahmyr Gibbs at 26. I think he's just as good as Bijan. So for me, I look at the 5th-year option. You get a premier running back, and then you just plug him in. Tony Pollard walks, and he's your guy for the next 5 years. But I do think that, like to Howman's point, the drop off from running backs in the first round to the middle part of the round really isn't that steep. Like you could find somebody like the kid out of Tulane, in the 2nd, 3rd round, late 3rd, late 2nd, and still have him be like a plus starter in the NFL. With the Cowboys, and what they've proven is that they can find guys on the offensive line in the first round and have them be plug and play guys and be successful at the next level. And I do think Steve Avila is a great name. You might even see maybe like a John Michael Schmitz where he's a center, but maybe they play him at guard, to start for his first season. And then you have some leverage over Tyler Biotish with regards to contract negotiations the following year. And then you have your plug and play center, you address guard, the next season. So for me, in this instance, yes, it does depend on who's there at running back. But I do love all the guys who are in like rounds 3 through 6 who you can get at running back. And for that reason, I'm going to take offensive guard here.
Danny, no tiebreaker needed, but just for the fun of it, what position are you going with?
Yeah, it's for sure going to be a sweep. But I will say this. I mean, I agree with everything that both of them said. It's both of these positions actually, I wrote articles about it as, the Cowboys like to get the best at something. And both of these have one of those players that could be that and I also agree with Brandon as far as Bijan or Gibbs. I mean, you could go either way there. To me, they're like 1A, 1B, but I also love 2A through 2G, because there's so many of them later. So it's going to be guard for me. And and Howman mentioned it, Osiris Torrance was like I think he was the first prospect I actually evaluated to, and and I think he would be great. He was solidify this offensive line, give us strength everywhere to me. And also, I think it would be cool to have, offensive line. We got Torrance, Smith, Tyler. Just, I don't know. It would be super confusing. And
that's nice.
I'm all for that. So, but yeah, so it's going to be clean sweep. Definitely. I don't want any part of a running back in the first round.
All right. Well, there you have it. Okay. So we're on to the second round of our offensive side of the bracket. And we are going to see tight end versus wide receiver. Who are y'all going with? And I know it's getting harder and harder, but Howman, real quick, my mom sent me a text and was very concerned for who the man is behind you in the window. I don't watch The Office. And for those of you listening to the podcast version of this, Howman has an Office background. And I don't watch The Office. So I don't know who that character's name is. My mom also clearly does not watch The Office, but she's very concerned for the man in your window behind you.
That is one of the best employees at Dunder Mifflin. His name's Stanley Hudson. And he's totally fine. He's just there taking a nap and hoping nobody notices. So nothing to worry about, but do go out and check out The Office. It's a great show.
All right. Well, I feel like taking a nap at work is not the best advice, but you know what? If you do, that is your prerogative. Are you going tight end or wide receiver here?
I'm going tight end. And for me, it's really honestly not that difficult for me, just because I've been riding the tight end train for a while now since the season ended. I just think, when you look at this offense, specifically with Mike McCarthy, the way that he uses tight ends, he really likes the big mismatch size guys, the athletic guys, and there's a lot of guys at the top of this draft class that really just fit that mold. And especially bringing in Brandon Cooks, you're pretty good at the top of your depth chart at wide receiver. And you've got, if you can get one of these tight ends that's going to be essentially a big slot receiver for you, I think that just opens up so much more possibilities, especially for Dak in the passing offense. And so for me, I think it's just a better spot to attack.
All right. Well, there you go. Let's go to Danny. I'm, I guess, not going to let him be the tiebreaker if there is one. But Danny, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I like I often do, I disagree with Howman. And,
there it is. There it is. We were waiting for that all night.
I knew it was going to happen eventually.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why.
Things come to an end. It's okay, Howman.
I don't find the tight ends. They don't jump off, jump out at me. There's the good ones too. And I don't have as much love for Musgrave as you guys do. And I am a Beaver. I'm a Beaver alum. So go Brandon Cooks. Boo Nashon, boo Musgrave. I am completely objective as far as my Cowboy players. I want good players. So I think he's fine, but not 26 fine. And so to me, I feel like there's players that I like later in the rounds for tight end, and I want to go. You guys see my flow chart. I want to go money 5. So wide receiver is a position, a more premium position. They're gonna be able to help the offense more. And remember, we got frickin' Frack on our team. So, it's not like we have a huge need at tight end. So to me, I agree with Howman that it is an easy decision, but it's going to be the wide receiver spot for me.
Shots fired. Oh man, we were waiting for that all night.
I did want to say too, my mom watches the show, and I just want to say that, hi to my mom, but I would never, I would never include anything she says though. Just have my mom filter in there, just because moms can be dingy a little time. Just
Sometimes my mom is just texting me all her little side comments that they're all nice, but I thought the man in the window one was really funny. Dan, it looks like Kevin gave your mom 5 points. So 5 points for Danny's mom. Brandon, you're our tiebreaker now. So again, absolutely zero pressure, but make the right decision.
Yeah, I'm going to go tight end here. And I say that because I agree with Howman. I think that when it comes to the tight ends that are in the draft, I would think, in my opinion, that Michael Mayer, not so much Washington out of Georgia, but Musgrave, and then also Dalton Kincaid. Dalton Kincaid, honestly, to me, might be one of the best pass catchers in general in the draft. I think he's one of the best pure pass catchers, even over the wide receivers. And like I said, I know both positions. This is a great matchup because both stretch throughout the draft, in my opinion. Like you can find a guy, Tucker Kraft, I think, is the guy, from South Dakota State. There's the guy from Old Dominion who's like 6'infinity. He's like super tall and really, really good. But I think that when it comes to the first round tight ends, I know there's been not a lot of success, not a lot of history in the NFL for guys that are pretty successful, but I'll take my chances with Mike McCarthy, Dak Prescott, who knows how to get the tight end involved. And let's just line up with Cooks, Lamb, Gallup, the first round draft pick in the tight end, Tony Pollard, and let's score 50 points this season.
Wow. Brandon really wants those 50 burgers. I love that. Okay, so that means we are on our final round before we find our winner of the offensive side of the bracket, and then we're going to move on to the defense here. So this means we are looking at the battle between tight end and offensive guard. Again, this is for the first round, number 26. Y'all, who are you going for? Danny, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
No, Brandon, go ahead. You are so eager about this. Please.
I was gonna say let's put Howman in the box this time and see how he does.
I was gonna reverse it a little bit. So Danny, go first. Let us have it. You going tight end or offensive guard?
Yeah, I mean, if I didn't get my point across the first time that I don't want a tight end in the first round, I'll do it again. I'll do it again. No, I mean, I also like Kincaid too, but again, it's I just don't think that's a good use of first round draft capital. Remember, tight ends don't hit the ground running. I mean, we didn't even see Schultz take off until year 3, so I feel like there's going to be a little bit more growing pains, learning curve with the tight end. So I would think of more about maybe a development guy type as far as how I'd approach that. So I'm really off the tight end. So guard to me is going to win. I'll just keep it short and sweet. I'm taking guard.
All right, Brandon, where are we going with this?
It's tough because I think these are the two logical positions that the Cowboys take in the first round. So I think that this is a great tiebreaker because I think that how they've addressed free agency and everything like this sets up perfectly for them. I agree with what Danny said where, the track history for the Cowboys, it's like, why wouldn't you take the offensive guard? Because this is who the Cowboys are familiar with. They hit home runs every single time. They're batting 1,000. But to me, when I look at how the Eagles and the Chiefs got to the Super Bowl, you need in the modern NFL a dynamic playmaker at tight end. And to me, that's something that the Cowboys haven't really had. And when I look at these tight ends in this class, deep and at the top, I think that you have dynamic tight ends in the top 4 with the 4 guys, the Luke Musgrave and everybody. So for that reason, I need to take that because I do think that the Cowboys can find an offensive guard. Maybe it is Tyler Smith at left guard, Tyron Smith at left tackle. Maybe Tyron finds the fountain of youth, and then you roll with that into the season. But for me, I got to go tight end with this one.
And I have a feeling Taylor Swift said it before. I think I've seen this film before, and I didn't like the ending. But in this case, I'm going to like the ending. Howman, where are we going? We going tight end or?
I'm going tight end. I could have built up all the suspense, but I think everybody probably knows I was going tight end. I understand people have concerns about, the miss rate on tight ends, especially in the first round. I actually wrote about that extensively in an article a couple of weeks ago, but basically the tight end is an evolving position right now. For a long time, they were a guy that really had to be a blocking presence, and they became they need to block, they need to be able to catch the quick passes. And now they're becoming, with Travis Kelce, with Kyle Pitts, they're becoming a guy that is going to be a featured part of your passing attack. And I think with this draft class specifically, we're going to see teams kind of make that shift because you have so many guys that in college have been used as a premier pass catching threat. So I think if the Cowboys were to embrace that, if they were going to go and draft a guy like Dalton Kincaid, who I think is the best tight end in this class, or one of the other guys, they would actually kind of be ahead of the curve on one of these trends for once, whereas it seems like most of the time they're kind of playing catch up. So I think that's kind of an added bonus of going tight end.
All right, so that means that your winner on the offensive side of the bracket is the tight end position. Now we're going to, Danny's not happy about this, but let's go ahead and go to the defensive / specialist side of the bracket, and we'll get to why there's 2 positions here, but let's go start from the first round. And keep in mind, guys, we have about 12 minutes left on this because we just have so much fun. And this is so much fun. But I want everyone to get their points across. Okay, first round, we're going defensive tackle versus linebacker, gentlemen. Danny, I'm going to start with you again. Who are we going with?
Oh man, this is another tough one. Oh brother.
Oh brother. I really want to cut that audio and make it like my morning, I don't know, my morning alarm maybe. Like I just love that.
I'll never talk again if you do. I'm gonna go with, first off, both of these positions are positions that aren't of high value. Cowboys in particular do not like defensive tackles. I can't even think of when last time they drafted a defensive tackle early. I think it was Russell Maryland. I don't know, it may be.
Yeah, I think so.
But I'm gonna go linebacker. I feel like that also too would give them, a linebacker can come in and hit the ground running. You put him with LVE and Damone Clark, and I think you got to feel really good about the linebacker spot. So I give the edge to linebacker.
All right, Howman, I'm going to jump over to you. Are you going linebacker or DT?
I'm going defensive tackle, and it seems like every single year in the draft, I'm like banging the drum. I want the Cowboys to break that streak and actually go out and draft a defensive tackle. And I'm gonna do it again this year. I really like Kalijah Cansey out of Pitt. I like Maisie Smith out of Michigan. I know the Cowboys aren't going to do it because they just don't value that position. But if I were the one in charge and making the pick, that's where I would go.
And real quick, I see some confused comments. Guys, we are going through one side of this bracket. We're playing March Madness BTB style here. So we're going through different categories, and then we're going to find the defensive or specialist position in this case that could be the Cowboys' first draft round. We already did the offensive side, but just a little refresh of the room. Brandon, I kept the people waiting in suspense. What is our tiebreaker?
I'm going to say, Howman, I mean, lest we forget that we've been slaying dragons since January, how you came on the pod after every loss, then the Cowboys go on and win in Tampa Bay for their first home or road playoff win in a very long time in the Navy jerseys. We're slaying dragons in the draft. They're going to be taking a defensive tackle in this scenario in round one because logic is just lining up that way, where now they're these spenders in free agency, and it just seems to be that way. And I do think that linebacker is very weak in this draft just in general, so they might find some depth, later in the draft. I think Jack Campbell maybe might sneak in there if they really do like him in the first round and just think, what the heck, let's just take him here. But I do think that when you have Van Der Esch, you have Damone Clark, and maybe Jabril Cox develops finally into something. Maybe you bring in somebody off the streets like a Deion Jones, something like that. I think that you're set up in that instance. But yeah, give me a really top flight defensive tackle in the first round. I think that's the route that the Cowboys can go. And Mozzie Smith, like big, beefy guy. So if they don't bring back Hankins, that's a good replacement.
All right, so we're going DT there on our first little round. Up next, we have, let's see, I didn't even change the banner. Guys, I'm so behind in this. I got so warped in this conversation.
I think it's because we really want it to be guard. I think we want it to be guard.
I think the universe really wants it to be guard there. Some force was like, I don't know, wiping my brain of changing the banner there. But our next round is defensive end versus cornerback. Y'all, this would have been a very different conversation, I think, had we talked about this a week ago. But Brandon, what are you thinking for this particular showdown?
Yeah, if it wasn't for Gilmore, I've been on the train for drafting, a cornerback all day. I know, with Gilmore in the picture now, it's more of a depth guy. But to me, you don't know what you have in Kelvin Joseph anymore. You don't know what you have in Nashawn Wright. Clearly, Danny believes that, he could be going back to the university for Holly Gares. But I do think that when it comes to the Cowboys, you can never have too many cornerbacks because of what you saw happen last season, where it was sort of like their crutch by the end of the year. And to me, I've been a big Emmanuel Forbes guy. I think that when it comes to, who you have when you look at next season, Stephon Gilmore might not be here. Trayvon Diggs might not be here. And then what are you really left with? So I think if you bring in a guy who's a first-round corner, that's somebody you can lock in with that fifth-year option for 5 years guaranteed. And then you're really ready to roll into next season. Just keep that train going. So I got to go cornerback here.
All right, Danny, it looks like Brian, who sent in a super chat earlier, who I'm so sorry I missed, by the way, it says that you've already won this roundtable, hands down, lock the doors, close up shop. That's what we're doing. But let's see how well you hold up on the defensive side of the bracket. Are you going DE or CB?
No, I'm also going to take cornerback too. These are the two money 5 spots on there. So I mean, I could go either way because I value both of them. But I'll just keep it short. I do think that the cornerback class is better. I like the cornerback class, but at the same, if we're talking first round picks, I don't actually. There's just not a lot of edge rushers that I'm enamored by. But I actually want to make a comment. Speaking of Watsamata, I want to make a comment on something he said way back yonder when he was talking about Dante Fowler. Is, we're all happy about it. Most of us happy about it. He's a good player, but could he be a progress stopper? I didn't expect him to return. I'm happy he's back, but could he be a progress stopper? We want to see year 2 of Sam Williams. So that's certainly something to take into account. But I think all that really means is the Cowboys have outstanding depth. So to me, no, they don't need an edge. Gilmore is going to be gone. He's only here for a year. And like Loree mentioned earlier, we got some questions on the corner. So I think this is an easy one for me. So I'm taking corner here.
And because of that, Howman, I am going to just assume you're going to go cornerback here. And for time's sake, because that already moved up, we're going to start with you for the next category. I did see your super chat, Brian, all thanks to Watsamata. Thank you for being a good friend. That is a good friend. Everybody needs a good friend like Watsamata to reiterate a super chat that we missed. So everyone needs a friend like that. We will get to that, I think, at the end of this block after this, because it does go back a little bit to the offense, but we will answer it. Let's go to the next round. That's going to be safety versus a specialist. With this one, it's a little different because I'm allowing you guys to use your imagination for whatever specialist you want. That can be a kicker. That can be a long snapper. Both positions that the Cowboys definitely need to address at some point. But do you think they address it in the first round, or are we all going to anonymously agree? We're going safety with this one. Howman, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I think it's safety. I think it's kind of it is a little bit of a toss up because there's not a whole lot of safeties at the top of this draft class that are like obvious first rounders, but still, just having good safeties, with the trio that the Cowboys have right now has made all the difference for this defense. So if you have to go with one of those two, let's go safety.
All right, Brandon and Danny, are we agreeing just safety for time's sake with this one? Although I'd be curious to see what your specialist of choice was. Brandon?
I was going to say there's no Roberto Aguayo in this draft, so for that reason, I can't draft first-round specialists.
All right, Danny, I'm assuming this is just a knockout. We're going 3 for 3 with this.
Yeah, I mean, I want no part of Robbie Gould, so I don't want any part of a specialist in the first round. So
okay.
easy choice for me.
All right, so let's go to our second round here. We're going defensive tackle versus cornerback with this one. Danny, let's go ahead and start with you, and then we'll go Brandon, then we'll go Howman.
I am taking the corner. I don't even think I took. Did I take DT? I didn't even take DT last time. So yeah, I mean, this shouldn't even be in my bracket. So I'm taking the corner. I mean, you look at the Cowboys situation with cornerback, and it's already been said, it's something that's going to be a position of need soon. So I would like for us to get ahead of this. We're going to pay Trayvon shortly, and so one way to kind of balance that is to have a nice 5-year rookie deal. So I'm taking corner here.
All right, Brandon, you going defensive tackle or cornerback?
I'm taking corner, and I had to think about it too, like Danny said, and I like how I'm hearing Danny's thought process throughout this because it's helping me too. But I have to go corner, and simply this is another factor of the reason why I want to take a corner in the first round is when you have Stephon Gilmore on the roster, like get as many people like around him to learn from him as possible, like soak in all that veteran leadership and experience he already talked about, talking to Trayvon and teaching him some things. So throw another guy in that mix and somebody that you can kind of develop. And then if you trade like the other guys, like a Kelvin Joseph, if he blows up for whatever reason, and has a great year, you trade him, and then this other guy kind of slides in. And I think that, it's just like Danny said, it just makes too much sense.
All right. And then Howman, which position are you going with?
It's already gone the way of the cornerback, but I still want my first round defensive tackle. So let the record show that that's what I would have voted for.
The record shows it, but the bracket does not. So sorry, we are
burn.
moving forward. That came on the spot, and I was just really proud of that. I had to say it. Okay, so that means our last round before we reach the championship round is going to be safety or cornerback. Howman, because I just burned you with that incredibly fire burn of mine, which way are you going? You going CB or safety?
Well, it was a fiery burn, and I am absolutely devastated. But I'll soldier on, and I'm going to go corner largely just because that's, we're good at safety. We've got, the trio back there, and with corner, there's the question of what happens when Stephon Gilmore is gone, and you've got, some other questions, especially with Trayvon Diggs and his contract coming up. I think you go and prioritize that position.
Brandon?
Yeah, corner's turning into Duke of the mid 2000s here. So I just, it would be weird if I said safety at this point. I've been standing on the stump for corner, so I just have to keep the train rolling with this one.
Choo choo, Danny. It already won, but just for the record, does your record match the bracket?
No, it absolutely does too. And I will add this too, is I feel like the Cowboys, I talked earlier about how they have an idea of the landscape. I don't think they see a lot of corners. They certainly not anyone they're going to be willing to use a high pick on too. Because, I was a little surprised by the Dono resigning, but, the Cowboys have 3 safeties under contract. So I think that kind of speaks to maybe they don't view this group as someone who, come in and replenish some of the guys that will be free agents next year. So I'm going to say corner, stand firm with cornerback.
I am too. And Ryan was asking me, or I think it was Ryan in the comments saying he wanted to know my viewpoint. Problem is that would make an even number of us and there could be ties there. There's no one to break the ties if that's the case. So that's why I had them 3 going at it with this bracket. But in this case, I'd go cornerback. Absolutely. What we've learned is we cannot have enough depth in these positions. We have learned that. We know that cornerback is an easy position to want to have more depth with, even with the new addition of Gilmore. But guys, we are in our championship round. Oh my goodness, that went by so fast. Championship round, so that means on your offensive side of the bracket, you're going tight end. On your defensive side of the bracket, you're going cornerback. So guys, just marinate in it for 1 second, literally 1 second. That is all you have because the banner is officially up. Danny, I'm going to start with you. Are you going tight end, which I know you just love so much? You're really rooting for that. Or are you going cornerback?
Yeah, there will not be any plot twists on this one. I'm definitely going to stick with how I feel. It's not even really tough to me. I feel like tight end's the Cinderella team of this bracket. How do they get there? What's going on? But you know what? The clock is going to strike 12 because I know one of my fellow, commenters over here is going to make a great case and stay with me, even though I know they love tight end. But so I'm going corner. I'm going to put the first stake in the ground for cornerback and just cross my fingers.
You're also talking about clocks, which reminds me of Taylor Swift's album Midnights, which goes to one of the greater songs on there called Mastermind. Howman, are you going to be a mastermind here? Are you going to pull some trickery with the tight end position and do the expected? Or are you going to go the unexpected and agree with Danny for the umpteenth time tonight, which I don't think any of us were expecting just once?
Well, yeah, I definitely could not agree with Danny again. I can't keep that streak going. So I'm going to go with tight end. I think, I've already laid out my case for why I think that the tight end is right now is an undervalued position. I think it's going to be a big part of this offense going forward, especially with the tight ends at the top of this draft class. And when you're talking about tight end versus corner, you're essentially looking at pass catcher versus somebody stopping the pass and offense defense. I think in the modern day NFL, you always should be prioritizing your offense. Offense wins games. So for me, it's tight end.
And let's see, Watsamata said, we made it 61 minutes before the first Taylor Swift mention. Actually, that is my 4th of the night. You just didn't catch on to the other ones. So I'm sorry. It's just kind of embedded in my language at this point. But Brandon, no pressure. This is the championship round. This is all or nothing. First place, the fate of the Dallas Cowboys first round draft pick for the 2023 NFL draft is in your hands, essentially.
Yeah.
Absolutely zero pressure. But what are you doing with all that pressure? Or is it going to make a diamond? Which way are we going here?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to shine bright like a diamond on this one. But listen,
That's
if any,
Rihanna, not Taylor Swift.
I know.
Just
I'm
for the
throwing it
record.
out there. Super Bowl halftime show, all that stuff. But listen, if anybody in the comments wants to know Jess's opinion, follow her on Twitter at Jess Nevarez _. I'm sure she'll be able to give
There's a lot of
her
them. Yep.
comments there. But for me, like I said, these are the two positions that I truly feel in my heart I would pick if I were the GM of the Cowboys. I know, like I mentioned earlier, guard and tight end seem to be the two that they would pick. But I do think that when it comes to the draft, there are a lot of cornerbacks that are starting to pop up that are first round guys. You see a lot of tight ends that are conventional, wisdom. These guys are going in the first round and then it extends. It is tough because I have been like, again, with Howman, with Danny, I do believe in the power 5 positions like Danny mentioned, because I do think that while, yes, tight end is valuable in the NFL right now, I do think it's important to have a legitimate one. I think that you can find a legitimate one later in the draft. If a first round cornerback falls to you at 26, yeah, not maybe the top guys, maybe like the guy from South Carolina, the guy from Maryland, Deonte Banks. I think you take those guys all day because of the fact that you have Ferguson and Hendershot for the foreseeable future. You don't know what you have at cornerback next year. And like I mentioned, I'd love to have that guy kind of go in the room with Stephon Gilmore, learn from that. So for that reason, I have to go cornerback on this one because, like I mentioned, it's just a power 5 position. It is the Duke of this bracket. No Fairleigh Dickinson here. Shout out New Jersey. But, in this case, I have to go corner.
All right, everybody. So it looks like because of Brandon, your Dallas Cowboys are picking at number 26 of the 2023 NFL Draft a cornerback. Let him know what you think in the comments. I mean, there were people, Watsamata was saying, don't let us down, like really passionate about that decision. So I think for the most part, everybody agreed here. Real quick, before I announce the BTB winner, I do want to go back to that super chat that I did promise we would go back to. It was on the offensive side of things, and it was from Brian, but Watsamata being a good friend that he has actually paid for the super chat to make sure we saw it again. So big shout out to them. It says, Tyron is no longer making starting OT money. Cowboys don't have to feel forced to play him like they did Zeke. Can be a fantastic swing tackle if we get a starting left guard and save his body. Guys, let's go around. Danny, you're nodding your head in agreement. What is your thought on that real quick before we announce the winner?
I love this question because, as I talked about earlier, I love this contract. And one of those, and the reason is the contract is based on playing time. And we all assume it wins Tyron going to get hurt. But it's not necessarily that. He could actually be that. If it turns out that Tyler is the guy, and Terrence is healthy, I mean, why would you play inferior tackles? You wouldn't. So he would be your swing tackle, and you know what? He wouldn't get those incentive, the raises too. So yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely comes into play. He could end up like being one of those just sitting on the shelf, late in the season.
Well, there you go. We appreciate everybody who tunes into these roundtables so much. We appreciate your questions, all your fun banter with us. We love it so much. But this wouldn't be a roundtable without a winner. And guys, we're doing the unexpected tonight. And so I feel like as host and taking part in this point system that I have over here, it's a very fantastic point system, but I can't let you in on it. I'm going to take an unexpected turn here, everybody. I am going to say, because I love somebody who stands true to their voice, their opinions, who doesn't change it no matter where they are, I'm going to say tonight's roundtable champion is Danny Phantom, because Danny, you didn't waver away once. I love that. None of you did, but Danny he's stayed strong on this hill. Every single time I talk to him, we get through our differences in a very respectful way, and I can appreciate that. So Danny, how does it feel to be the champion, even though it was a close call for you there, because tight end could have potentially won that first place, and I feel like that would have ruined your night. But overall, how are you feeling being the new BTB Roundtable champion for the week?
I'm really surprised, honestly, because I agree with what you just said. I mean, this panel is one of the smartest group of Cowboy fans under the age of 30. If you guys are, I don't know. But nonetheless, just a really smart group. And you guys had great things to say. And I didn't think it was looking very good for me because my bracket got blown up, basically. But you guys, great integrity with your answers, too. So, you have your opinions and you stick with it, and I appreciate that about you. So very surprised that I actually was able to come out of this one. It's a very strong competition tonight.
And you and Howman agreeing. Howman, between the man in the back of your window and all the Taylor Swift references that I know you understand, how are you feeling? Are you taking this loss hard? Because you did come to my defense on Twitter earlier this week with B1. And Danny, I also loved your banter in on that whole wrestling debacle there too. But Howman, how are you taking this? Are you doing okay?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm taking solace in the fact that, Danny won and we spent most of the night agreeing with each other. So that almost feels like, I've shared in this win.
So basically, Brandon's the only one that did not win tonight, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Well, and I truly do feel like a loser, and not because I didn't win, but because I think if I went tight end here, I might have gotten, the vote for Howman here, and unfortunately, I think I cost him the victory. So that's on me. I take full ownership of that. Please blame me for the next week, but that's okay. We know we align on a lot of things, so I'm okay with that too.
I also feel like if I picked you as the winner, people would think I'm biased.
Exactly.
So you were kind of out of being the winner from the beginning, to be honest. But gentlemen, where can people find all of your incredible work that you do with Blogging the Boys? Danny, we'll start with you. We'll go around to Brandon. Howman, you'll wrap things up, and then we are out of here.
Now, if you ever see anything that I tweet that you don't agree with, you can follow me at _DH44_. No, that's not. I'm at Danny Phantom 24.
Yeah, short and sweet. I'm at Brandon is right, WRITE, because again, in the journalistic sense, I write. Sometimes I am right, but clearly not right enough to win tonight. So, shout out to my my terrible Twitter handle, and we're just gonna move on.
Moving on, Howman, where can people find you?
It's such a coincidence that Danny and I have the same Twitter handle, because you can also find me on Twitter at _DH44_. And if you see any opinions there that you don't agree with, well, take it up with the boss. I can't do anything for you.
It's okay. It's all right. It's all good. You can find me at Jess Nevarez _ on Twitter. I'm going to shamelessly tweet Taylor Swift things tied in with my Cowboy stuff. That's just become what it is. And that's okay. So speaking of which, Howman, since you claim you're half of the winner and you're taking some of Danny's success, which I think is kind of wrong, but that's okay. You get to lead us out. Go ahead and sing us your favorite Taylor Swift song as we go out in 3, 2, 1, hit it.
I don't know about you, but I'm feeling 22.